Hello, I'm Leonard Leff, and hey, have you heard the one about the man and his dog who went to see Gone with the Wind? On leaving the theater, the man said of the dog, "I should have left him home. He preferred the book." Francois Truffaut shared that story with Hitchcock when the two met in August 1962, with Helen Scott as their translator.
Well, that story has been told in many
Oui,
forms.
cette histoire a été racontée en plusieurs formes.
They tell it about two goats
On
eating up
raconte la même histoire de deux chèvres
two film cans,
qui dévorent deux bobines de film
of a certain story.
d'une certaine histoire.
And one goat says to the other,
Une chèvre dit à
I
l'autre,
prefer the book myself.
moi je préfère le livre moi-même.
Meaning that they eat the book as well.
C'est-à-dire qu'ils mangent le livre aussi bien.
At the risk of sounding like an old goat, I must say that when it comes to the 39 Steps, I prefer the screen version to the book on which it was based. That said, for many years before he directed the movie, Hitchcock had been an admirer of John Buchan and his 1915 novel, also called The 39 Steps. Buchan, a Scotsman, was a remarkable person. He was a champion of British imperialism and a Governor-General of Canada, as well as the author who reinvented the thriller for the 20th century. Hitchcock, to judge from the great control he exercised over narrative pacing in his films, may have been drawn to Buchan for the breakneck speed of his adventure novels, or as the author called them, his shockers. Hitchcock may also have been shaped by what Buchan said of his own The 39 Steps, that its incidents, quote, defy the probabilities and march just inside the borders of the possible. The credited writers on the 39 Steps, Charles Bennett and Ian Hay, were graduates of the University of Hitchcock, where they learned all about operating along the borders of the possible. As the director later told Truffaut,
If you want to analyze everything in terms of plausibility,
Si vous voulez tout analyser en termes de plausibilité,
then you end up doing a documentary.
vous finissez par faire un documentaire.
that, said Hitchcock, was anathema.
So long as it's not dull,
Et du moment que ça n'est pas sans intérêt, monotone,
I think we can do whatever we like. We
je
should
pense
have
que nous pouvons
all
faire
freedom.
tout ce que nous voulons et nous devrions avoir une liberté totale.
A critic who talks to me about
Un critique qui me parle de
plausibility
vraisemblance
is a dull fellow.
est un type sans imagination.
Hitchcock called his writers his constructionists. Along with his wife, Alma Reville, they helped arrange the incidents of a story into a coherent whole. On the 39 Steps, they apparently helped him enrich the characterization of the Buchan novel and sharpened its classical underpinnings. In the ancient tales of the Greeks, the hero sets out on a journey or quest. So does Hannay. The hero finds himself in a strange wilderness or underworld. So does Hannay. The hero faces a series of obstacles, as does Hannay. The hero dies and has an astonishing and implausible rebirth. So does Hannay. And finally, the hero returns from his journey with the capacity to save himself and the world. So does Hannay.
What are the 39 steps?
None of this means that Buchan's lead character or his screen counterpart was classically heroic. In the novel, Hannay was 37 years old and, quote, pretty well disgusted with life. His social calendar was threadbare. He had no evident interest in women and had a vague desire for adventure that London could not satisfy. Soon enough, however, he had more excitement than he bargained for, much of which was, again, delightfully implausible. At one point in the novel, for instance, Hannay sees a small mosquito-like aircraft that, moments later, starts flying low and rapidly coming towards him. He charges down a hill, quote, like blue lightning, screwing my head around, whenever I dared, to watch that damn flying machine. Soon I was on a road between hedges and dipping to the deep-cut glen of a stream," unquote. What Buchan called espionage from the air had its fleeting moment in Hitchcock's adaptation. Like any great artist, though, Hitchcock had a long memory. Almost 25 years after the release of the 39 Steps, he used a flying machine for one of the most iconic sequences in movie history. In the 1920s, the notion of a British film garnering an audience abroad was as implausible as espionage from the air. In the mid-1930s, however, when the 39 Steps went into production at Gaumont British Studios, British actors, and thus British pictures, were gaining a toehold in the United States. Before they appeared in the 39 Steps, for example, both Madeleine Carroll and Robert Donat had won critical praise and exposure in North America. In the early 30s, according to the New York Times, Carroll was, quote, charming and able. She was an English rose, conventionally feminine and demure. The persona of the Hollywood blonde, like Carole Lombard, Jean Harlow, or Mae West, promised fun or sex, or both at once. The persona of Madeleine Carroll seemed to say, "Look, don't touch." Under the direction of Hitchcock, Carroll blossomed into an English rose with a smattering of thorns. She was the first out-and-out Hitchcock blonde. Moreover, she was the model for those Hitchcock blondes who followed. She was smart and spunky, as the press book for the 39 Steps called her, as well as independent.
From now on, do every single thing I tell you to do and do it quick.
You big bully.
She was also unafraid of men or her own sexuality, which she nonetheless held in reserve. As Hitchcock said of her and his other sophisticated ladies, quote, "Sex should not be advertised, because without the element of surprise, the scenes become meaningless."
My attitude towards putting sex on the screen, as you
Non, mon
know,
attitude en démontrant le sexe sur
is
l'écran,
that I think it should be suspenseful.
je crois qu'il devrait y avoir du
I
suspense.
don't think it should be obvious.
Je ne crois pas que ça doit être trop clair.
Hence my
évident.
choice of the type of women.
Et,
The Grace Kelly
et mon
type.
choix du genre de femme, le genre Grace Kelly.
You know, in other words, what are we after?
C'est-à-dire,
We're
qu'est-ce que cherchons-nous?
ladies in the drawing room
Nous cherchons des femmes dans de grands salons,
who
des
become
dames,
whores in the bedroom.
qui deviennent des putains dans la chambre à coucher.
Speaking of sex and surprise, in the 39 Steps, Hitchcock observes the conventions of a genre that was then more or less new to him, the romantic comedy. The tone of these 1930s pictures was less sentimental than mischievous, and so, like their Hollywood cousins, Hannah and Pamela meet cute. For a moment here, she loses her poise. Her glasses convey her intelligence, as glasses do for Ingrid Bergman in Spellbound, Pat Hitchcock, the director's daughter, in Strangers on a Train, and Barbara Bel Geddes in Vertigo. The glasses also hint at her vulnerability. Pamela, however, quickly recovers her composure, not least because she does not seem threatened by Hannah, which leads us to Robert Donat. The year before Donat made the 39 Steps, he had starred in The Count of Monte Cristo, a great success on both sides of the Atlantic. He was cast in the 39 Steps because, as producer Michael Balkin said, the name Robert Donat would be integral to marketing the film in the United States. Alexander Korda praised Donat as manly without a trace of truculence and gentle without ever suggesting weakness. Hitchcock liked him too because, as Donat told the press, "I know how to keep still." His voice was another of his assets, gentle, reverberating, musical.
I'll say I have. I'm on the tramp looking for a job.
Well, won't you sit down, please, while I go on with our supper?
Oh, thank you.
As historian Charles Barr has pointed out, other Hitchcock leading men of the period, like Herbert Marshall and Leslie Banks, had class-specific voices. Donat was more the English common man, and thus was the perfect complement to Madeleine Carroll's spiky English rose. Actors, Hitchcock once said, should be treated as cattle. Think of Hitchcock, for instance, and you think, perhaps first, of cutting, rapid cutting, where the performance of the actor becomes one more element in the cinematic mix. Notable examples include the shower murder in Psycho, the avian attacks in The Birds, the crop duster sequence in North by Northwest, and, on a smaller scale but no less important, the opening of the 39 Steps. Hitchcock once said, "To speak with its own language, the screen must treat an acted scene as a piece of raw material, which must be broken up and taken to bits before it can be woven into an expressive visual pattern." Hitchcock's editing was masterful, and not just in the bravura scenes. Look at this critical sequence that takes Margaret from ignorance to knowledge. It's 35 seconds long, 9 cuts in all. It opens on a shot of all 3 characters. When it ends, again on a 3-shot of Hannay, John, and Margaret, each character has changed. Despite the introduction of disorder, though, Hitchcock cuts the sequence with a rigorous and ironic attention to order. The newspaper appears in shot 5, Margaret in shots 4 and 6, Hannay in shots 3 and 7, John in shots 2 and 8. The brevity of the shots not only sped up the pulse of the sequence, it also ratcheted up the suspense. Looking at one character, we longed to see the reaction of others. Appearing in shots less than 4 seconds each, the actors may have seemed so much raw material in the hands of the director. For all his bluster about cattle, however, the director liked and trusted many of his actors. In this, the last shot of this sequence, for example, Hitchcock refrained from editing. When finished, this shot will have lasted almost 2 minutes, a single running of the camera, uncut.
I'll admit you're the white man's burden.
I know, and I can't tell you what comfort that thought gives me.
The long take gave the actors more control over their characterizations. Moreover, it not only slowed down the pulse of the scene, it also made the use of montage elsewhere even more effective.
I see. You're still sticking to your penny novelette spy story.
The 39 Steps was the second of 6 Hitchcock films that have been called the Thriller Sextet: The Man Who Knew Too Much, The 39 Steps, Secret Agent, Sabotage, Young and Innocent, and The Lady Vanishes. The 39 Steps may have had the strongest cast, from the exotic Lucy Mannheim to John Laurie, Peggy Ashcroft, and Wiley Watson, known, according to the press book, as the most authentic and inspired drunk in talking films. The 39 Steps may also be the wittiest and the sexiest of the Thriller Sextet. The press book also referred to the, quote, spicy situations in the picture. They began with the beginning, when Hannay and the audience mistook Annabella Smith for a prostitute.
What do you think I do for a living?
Actress?
Not in the way you mean.
Chorus?
No.
I'm sorry.
I'm a freelance.
Hannay apologizes because chorus girls were apparently thought even more sexually available than actresses. When it came to censorship and the 39 Steps, Hitchcock marched just inside the borders of the possible, and sometimes beyond. Where were the censors when the director was brewing up this comic blend of the sacred and the profane?
Put a pretty girl inside those, and she needn't be ashamed of herself anywhere.
All right, bring it back to me when it's filled.
I will.
Where were they during the sex charge scene at the Argyle Arms? Notice that the four-poster bed, a bower for honeymooners, holds both Pamela and Hannay, and that was a presumed violation of British as well as American censorship. So was the contact of bare hand on bare leg. These and more nonetheless passed the censors. Hitchcock once explained how he walked through the minefield of British censorship with pictures like the 39 Steps. Brooke Wilkinson, the chief censor, was blind in one eye. During censorship screenings, Hitchcock sat next to him on the side with his good eye. Just before a risque moment occurred, the director would lean toward the censor and whisper something. Turning his head toward Hitchcock, the censor had only his blind eye on the screen. The lighter moments of the 39 Steps focus for the most part on the development of the romance. The darker ones, however, remind us of what a John Buchan character once said, quote, "Civilization anywhere is a very thin crust." Hitchcock could not have agreed more. In The Man Who Knew Too Much, the director staged an attempted assassination in the revered Albert Hall. In the 39 Steps, he continued his assault on the social order. As in the Albert Hall, the music hall has a fixed bill of fare that offers a momentary escape from the uncertainties and perils of ordinary life. Into this site of order and organization, Annabella Smith introduces chaos. Over the course of the narrative, Hannay learns that appearances lie and that civilization is indeed brittle. The professor, portrayed by Godfrey Tyrrell, who usually played the hero in movies, has standing in the community and, when not betraying his country, leads a comfortable, upper-class family life. In a moment at once funny and chilling, his wife does not blink when she sees her husband pointing a gun at their guest.
I thought you were coming to lunch directly, dear. We've all been waiting.
A nice Hitchcock touch there. How very civilized they seem. In fact, the professor and his wife do seem well matched and well married. So do the cheerful and law-abiding owners of the Argyle Arms. But elsewhere, Hitchcock uses marriage to expose, again, that very thin crust. The most harrowing portrait of marriage in any Hitchcock film occurs in the Crofter sequence that we looked at earlier. Tucked into the corners of the 39 Steps, in addition, are husbands who go gallivanting,
Ladies first.
Where's my old man been since last Saturday?
husbands who find their wives repellent,
The old-fashioned sort. Brrr, my wife.
and husbands who see themselves serving out a long life sentence in the bonds or bondage of matrimony.
You married?
Yes, but don't rub it in. What's the idea now?
Well, I'm not, you see. I'm a bachelor.
Oh, are you?
There it is again, the Hitchcock touch, an attribute as hard to define as it was to duplicate. Other film directors had, like Hitchcock, a sense of humor, and many others had, like Hitchcock, an interest in murder and the macabre. But the droll wit of Hitchcock was unique, and so was his aesthetic. About certain things, for example, plausibility, Hitchcock was blasé. The MacGuffin, for instance, was the most famous cipher in cinema. It's what the villains seek or have, and what the hero must take or keep from them in order to protect civilization. In The Lady Vanishes, almost all of which takes place on a train, the MacGuffin consists of a coded message contained within a popular song.
The first part of it goes like this. Ta 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 da dee. Oh, perhaps I'd better write it down.
In other pictures, as Hitchcock told Truffaut, the MacGuffin could be the plans, the formula, the microfilm, the thingamabob, and so on.
My contention has always been
Et mon idée à moi a toujours été
that although for the characters in the story
bien que pour les personnages de l'histoire,
they are most vital,
ils sont terriblement importants,
to me,
pour moi,
the teller of the story,
le narrateur de l'histoire,
they're absolutely nothing.
il ne signifie absolument rien.
What was vital was the repetition of certain motifs that Hitchcock endowed with an acute emotional resonance. Dizzying heights were commonplace, whether basic to the story, as in Vertigo, or incidental, as here. Trains were also commonplace, owing to their power, their movement, and their curious combination of liberty and entrapment. Knives appeared frequently. In North by Northwest, which reprised many aspects of the 39 Steps, an assassin stabbed a diplomat who fell across Roger Thornhill, much as Annabella fell across Hannay. One motif was so important to Hitchcock that it became the title of one of his films, The Wrong Man, with Henry Fonda. In the 39 Steps, Hannay was wrongly not only suspected of murdering Annabella Smith, but mistaken as part of an espionage ring and shot point blank in the chest, all because of a MacGuffin. The implausible adventures of Richard Hannay end where they began. Or do they?
I owe you an explanation.
Well, don't bother about
Perhaps he was nobody 4 days before. But in the process of saving his own skin, he has also saved the world, or at least a corner of it. On the domestic front, he has moved from the passive London visitor in the first reel to a man in love in the last. In an alternate ending of the film, Hannay told Pamela that because they registered at the Argyll Arms as husband and wife, they were, by Scottish law, husband and wife. The ending that was used, however, was more nuanced and more complex. This, the final shot of the picture, is another long take, almost 1.5 minutes long. The near-naked chorus girls call to mind Eros, the life instinct, whereas the shooting of Mr. Memory represents violence, destruction, and the death drive.
Hey, I'm glad it's off my mind. At last.
Poised between these two forces stand Pamela and Hannay. The composition is as balanced as that of a bride and groom before the altar. The two join hands, tentatively, for they know that the world can be a cold, dangerous place, and that marriage cannot be taken lightly. The ending of this serio-comic movie, then, seems far more serious than comic, and it would not be the last Hitchcock picture that concluded provocatively on an ambiguous note. Maybe, however, that explains why we enjoy returning to Hitchcock and one of his most satisfying and enduring achievements, the 39 Steps. I'm Leonard Leff. Thanks for watching and listening.
Will it be all right, me telling you, sir? It was a big job to learn it, the biggest job I ever tackled. And I don't want to throw it all away, sir.
It'll be quite all right.
The first feature of the new engine is its greatly increased ratio of compression, represented by R minus 1 over R to the power of gamma, where R represents the ratio of compression, and gamma, seen in end elevation, the axis of the two lines of cylinder.